Xi Jinping making his economic ambitions very clear. He wants China's yuan to rival the dollar. A 2024 speech that's resurfacing today gives us a rare look into the CCP's plan for global markets. They want their currency to become a global reserve currency, basically more leverage for Beijing and less dollar dominance. But, well, unfortunately for China, reserve currencies are earned through open markets, transparency, and trust. And, Mike, that's not something that China has.
No, it's not. And I think anyone who thinks maybe China's not our adversary, they want to replace the United States as the world's economic leader. And so when you look at this, I don't see it happening. And I think what's going on down in the White House is the biggest reason for it. This was getting traction a few years ago, but President Trump and his America First agenda and promoting not just at home, but America globally, we're in the best position we've been in as a nation in a very long time, and that means our adversaries, China, struggling to keep up.
My only worry, and Brian, you're looking at me skeptically, so I'll come to you on this.
I'm thinking about what Murphy said skeptically, but I'm looking at
Okay. It might have been 5 years ago. I believe it was Goldman who said by 2030, 2040, 2050, China's currency, the yuan, will rival the U.S. dollar for dominance.
Yeah.
It may not happen tomorrow, but it could happen in 20 years. It could happen in 30 years. Now, people always poo-poo me when I say that. They're like, yeah, we also thought it was going to overtake the U.S. economy by 2025, and we're crushing them. Their economy isn't growing the way ours is. So I understand that. But when you have big experts, I know, people like Goldman Sachs, but when they say that, it does make me think twice about China, the way they can outmove her, try to team up with other partners to take us on.
I don't believe that communism wins in a fair fight.
Yeah.
But I know that China doesn't fight fair. And what we thought was, well, they're going to, the guys that they're going to pick off basically and get into this sort of yuan circle of currency were going to be like the Indias and the Brazils, right, and so forth, the BRICS countries. And maybe that's true. But here's where they could win that I didn't have on my bingo card. With leaders like Mark Carney in Canada and Emmanuel Macron in France, they maybe don't need to go after the small guys because those guys are now going to China, right? We've seen the comments the last few weeks about Carney cutting a deal with China and Macron doing the same thing for France. Can you imagine a world where actually the people who align with China and become a closer part of their currency circle are those guys? And it's because of the failure of their own economic policies in countries that should have a natural alignment with the U.S. So China's happy to have whoever, I think, in this circle. But I think it might actually be the guys who should know better and actually have the strength to resist that are going to hitch their wagon to China.
I see your skeptical look, and I'll raise you a skeptical look. Canada can't partner with China. I think would be the end of them as they exist right now. They're our northern neighbor. Carney, I think, is posturing, and they need the United States arguably more than anyone else does. France, kind of the same, but I don't see a world where France could partner with China either. What does that partnership look like? I don't know.
Well, any partnership with China is one-sided. Like,
yes.
You're doing what serves their interest, which is why I don't know what Canada's selling China canola oil, okay, and China is sending Canada 50,000 electric vehicles. Who's going to win in that battle in the future, right? So maybe Canada can't do it, but they are, and it looks like a pretty dumb deal so far.
I'm laughing because canola oil is pretty inflammatory, and I don't think you want to be eating or drinking that stuff anyways. Jackie, my question for you. We talked in the intro about the structural reasons why China could not do this. They don't have market transparency. They don't allow you would even take your money out of the country. I mean, literally, it is insane. But they've increased the use of how they, trade in terms of settlement and how they're increasing in some international payments. Is it a real threat? You not worried?
That's why the weak dollar, the way it stands, if it stays that way for a prolonged period of time, to the point that you made about the Goldman Sachs forecast, is an issue, which is why I believe the president wants Kevin Warsh to kind of balance the system out. I don't think he wants to see the dollar, spike up in a way that's going to mess up the whole equilibrium, but he does want to see a stronger dollar. You guys were just joking about canola oil, but I want to talk about real oil because it gets back to your point. In 1974, the U.S. dollar was made the reserve currency to trade oil. That's how oil was traded in U.S. dollars. In recent years, you read stories, and I was always floored by this because I just never thought we would, even contemplate any kind of change like that, where the Chinese and the Russians, who were cozying up to those parties in the Middle East that are big players, wanted to change the currency in which oil trades. And what did they want to change it to? The yuan or the ruble? Obviously, that never happened. But, we have a protectionist president to a certain degree who understands that if you sort of just let these things go over time, as other nations become stronger on the global stage and we become weaker, you will see transitions like this happen, even if, 10 years ago, you couldn't even imagine that it was possible. And so that's part of his overall goal, I think, is to look at these other countries and say, I don't know what kind of thoughts you are having about this, but this is not going to fly here.
Jerry, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, we've got a long way to go to
we do.
China being.
Yep.
I mean, let me give you a couple of numbers here. As of the third quarter of 2025, the dollar accounted for 57% of global reserves. The euro came in at 20, and the yuan at 1.93%. I just found something funny in the statement from Xi Jinping. He needs three things, he says, to become the world's reserve currency. He needs a powerful central bank. He needs globally competitive financial institutions and financial centers that can attract global capital.
Doesn't sound like China.
Well, I was going to say, so you worry about an independent Fed here in the U.S. of A. Can you imagine how non-independent a Fed, you're laughing, a Fed in China would be? I mean, they would be marching in lockstep, with Xi Jinping, right?
I think we can safely say, not a threat for now, but we're on it if it ever happens. Mike, want to talk to you about this. We're showing shares of Tesla because we're talking about Elon Musk, even though I want to talk about SpaceX and XAI. We hear that they are in advanced talks to merge. XAI may be valued at $200 billion. SpaceX may be valued at about $800 billion. The central catalyst for the merger, we hear, is it's a need for capital. XAI is burning through about $1 billion in cash a month. Do you like a merger or not?
I love a merger, and really it's because Elon Musk is looking to the future. He's already talked about not making cars anymore at Tesla or the Model S and X, and talking about the robots.
Yeah.
So now where he's going with this, and colonizing Mars was such a foreign thought a few years ago, and now where we are with SpaceX, thinking like, maybe this could be real. So if he needs it to fund these companies and fund what he's doing, betting against Elon Musk, you're batting zero. So I'd bet with Elon Musk here, for sure.
Jackie's interested in colonizing Mars, but she wants to go alone.